Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanmo TV. This is very much an impromptu video. It's one that I've just decided to do on the spur of the moment. I'm a bit well, I've had a few drinks actually. I had a couple of drinks, so I'm maybe not on my usual making videos moment. I'll have a few more in a minute actually, because I need to toast somebody, as they say. I've not really planned this, and it's a bit impromptu. I've printed out some notes, and I'm just going to go with that and do it completely off the cuff. This is just me talking normally. I don't do many videos like that, but I'm going to do one now. I might do another video on this subject, but right now I'm just going to give you my initial feelings. I've taken the phone off the hook and everything. Yes, I have. What can I say? Stanton Friedman has died. I'm like, what the hell? What the fuck? I mean, it's like, you know, he's an 84-year-old man, and of course he's going to die. And of course he's probably going to die in the near future. I've always known this. Well, I've known that he's old. I mean, he's an old guy. And I also know he was not in the best of health. He had a heart attack, pretty bad heart attack about 3 years ago. And I actually mentioned this in one of my UFO disclosure videos, and about how I just thought to myself, I thought maybe we were going to lose him. But he carried on living, he carried on with what he was doing, and he even attended the UFO Truth magazine conference. I actually, I interviewed Stan actually. I spoke to him and I interviewed him. I met him, of course, at UFO Truth, but a couple of years before that I interviewed him actually in 2013 at the time of the citizen hearing. Now, I will put a link in the description box to my interview with Stan. And I'll do a tribute show on Hapanmo Radio at some point, because I know a lot of you who watch Hapanmo TV don't listen to Hapanmo Radio. But just listen to this show, because I interviewed Stan. It was such an honour to interview Stan, and it was great. It was a great show. It really was. Anyway, I just printed out his Wikipedia page basically, and a few comments from other people, and I'll just go through those and talk a little bit about Stan and what he did, and maybe some more ideas will come to me. I think they will probably come to me. Stanton Terry Friedman, born 29th of July 1934. He was a couple of months short of his 85th birthday. Was a retired nuclear physicist and professional ufologist who resided in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. And he's the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident. That's true. Basically, what we know, a lot of what we know about Stanton Friedman, what we know about Roswell, comes from Stanton T. Friedman. Stanton T. Friedman, basically in 1978, he was doing a show. He was doing a UFO. He was at a UFO conference somewhere. I don't know where. Oh God, I don't know where. But he was approached by a man who said, "I've got someone you need to know. You need to speak to." His name's Jesse Marcel. And he actually saw a UFO and held the remains of a UFO in his hand. And, well, Harry met Stan, and that was it. Or Jesse met Stan, rather. And that was it. History was made. But yeah, I mean, a lot of what we know, I mean, that was really the moment the re-investigation, the reopening of the Roswell incident actually happened. I'll just change the angle on my camera slightly. That was when the reopening of the Roswell incident actually happened. I think it was that moment when Jesse met Stan. Jesse Marcel spoke to Jesse Marcel Sr. spoke to Stanton T. Friedman. It resulted in this book. I'll get the book. Hang on. I want to show you the book. It's a rare book, and I've got a copy. I actually had another copy of this book and read it, but it resulted in, of course, this classic book, which I've shown you before, the Roswell Incident by Charles Berlitz and William Moore. I've shown you this before, haven't I? Yeah, I have. But it's a classic book. This is a first edition. I was very lucky to get hold of this. It's an absolute... Basically, this is the foundational text of the Roswell incident. And a lot of the other books written from then, as a result of that, including my own Roswell trilogy, would not have existed if it wasn't for that book. And Stan Friedman was the guy, basically, even though he's not an author, he was not the author of the book, he's authored many other books, which I'll talk about in a minute. He was the guy who basically made that happen. He was the man behind Roswell. The skeptics will say that he invented it or he made it up or something like that. No, he didn't make it up. I need my dragon juice one moment. Oh, yeah, here we go. He didn't make it up. He didn't make up Roswell. He was like the instigator of the research project, which led to so many other people talking about Roswell. Anyway, Friedman graduated from Linden High School and the University of Chicago, earning a Bachelor of Science in 1955 and Master of Science degree in nuclear physics in 1956. He was employed for 14 years as a nuclear physicist for companies such as General Electric, Aerojet, General Nucleonics, and General Motors, Westinghouse, TRW Systems, McDonnell Douglas. That's within the military-industrial complex and things like that. Now, so what I'm saying is Stan is definitely not some kind of tinfoil hat-wearing loony. He's not like me, in other words. He's not some bloke who just stands on some hillside up to his ankles up to the top of his Wellingtons in mud with a camera pointed at the sky, is he? Well, not there's anything wrong with that, no offence, Win Keach, but you know what I'm talking about. He was a serious guy, a serious scientist, and he was involved. This is interesting. When he was at McDonnell Douglas, he worked on advanced classified programs on nuclear aircraft, fission and fusion rockets, compact and radon detection industry. Now, Friedman's professional affiliations have included American Nuclear Society and American Physical Society, the American Institute of Aeronautical and Astronautics, and AFTRA. Right, that's what I'm saying is he actually started working on designs for a nuclear-powered aircraft. Now, nothing came of them. Of course, this was just in the days when the slow detonation of nuclear fission had first been discovered. When it was immediately employed in designs of new forms of submarines. The Hyman Rickover type nuclear reactor, which went into to create a nuclear submarine, and people thought we could do something similar for aircraft. And Stanton was involved in that. It didn't work out, but it was a proposal, a serious proposal. In 1970, Friedman left full-time employment as a physicist to pursue the scientific investigation of UFOs. He left his lucrative scientific work, which would have earned him a lot of money. He was a highly qualified man, earned him a lot of money, and he left it to work full-time in basically what? UFOs, what we're doing now. In 1970, that's before I was born, and he's been doing that ever since. Since then, he's given lectures at more than 600 colleges and more than 100 professional groups in all 50 of the United States, 10 provinces of Canada, and 19 countries outside North America. He's gone everywhere. He really has. Additionally, he's worked as a consultant on the topic of UFOs. He's published more than 80 UFO-related papers and has appeared on many radio and television programs, yes, including Panama Radio, I'm very proud to say. There's a link in the description box. Please listen to my interview with Stan. He's also provided written testimony to the congressional hearings. That's right, congressional hearings. That is the original ones in 1969 and the citizen hearing in 2013. And he's appeared twice at the United Nations. He met Eric Gehry, the Prime Minister of Grenada. They met. There's photographs of them together. The guy I've talked about on other programs. Friedman has consistently favoured the use of the term flying saucer in his work, saying flying saucers are by definition unidentified flying objects, but very few unidentified flying objects are flying saucers. I think what he means is that unidentified flying object is just anything you see in the sky that you can't recognise, which I go along with. Whereas flying saucers really means the UFOs that defy explanation, those that are extraterrestrial. Friedman used to refer to himself as the flying saucer physicist because of his degree in nuclear physicist and his work on nuclear projects. Friedman's positions regarding UFOs. Friedman was the first civilian to document the site of the Roswell UFO incident. He was the first of any kind of person to do that. And supports the hypothesis that it was a genuine crash of an extraterrestrial spacecraft. Sorry, my bloody printer's not very good. Hang on. In 1968, Friedman told a committee of the US House of Representatives, that was it, 68, not 69, that the evidence suggests that Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled vehicles. Well, we've always said that, haven't we? Friedman also stated he believed that UFO sightings were consistent with magnetohydrodynamic propulsion. Now, this is, I don't know if this is where basically you charge electromagnetic force moves objects. I mean, this is something that some ships use. It's where you have like a kind of, it's like a jet engine for water, and it actually, using this force, it actually moves the water through a channel which you could use for propulsion. In 1996, after researching the fact that and fact-checking the Majestic 12 documents, that's interesting, the Majestic 12 documents, yeah, Friedman said that there was no substantial grounds for dismissing their authenticity. Now, this is something that's come and gone. It's gone through peaks and troughs in a sine wave of interest. But the Majestic 12 documents, first published in the 1980s, first published in Britain by Timothy Good in his book Above Top Secret. As Dolan puts it very well, he thinks if they are fake, they're extraordinarily good fakes. They're fakes beyond what it was necessary, really, that most fakes reach. You don't need to make them that good to make them believable for most ufologists. I think that's the point he was making. I think Bill Wood's work on MJ12 has really convinced me that they're real. And I went through, I vacillated between them being fake and real. I think they're real now. And it was when he analysed the typing. They were typed on a Remington 12 typewriter. Now, they weren't, you know, so if they were created in the 80s as a hoax and sent to Jamie Chanderay as some kind of fraud, the hoaxers must have got hold of a Remington 12 typewriter. The thing is, the Remington 12 is not used anymore in typewriting. You know, no one has typewriters now anyway, do they? But at the time it was made, there was only about 5 of them left in the world, and they were all in museums. So I agree with Stan. I think they're authentic. What's more, he had a bet with Philip Klass, that ignorance, disinfo agent. I think he was beyond ignorant. I mean, there's a limit to how stupid people can be by accident. He was a disinformation agent. I've no doubt about it. He had a bet with Klass that he could find, you know, basically it's a little bet over the authenticity of Majestic 12. I don't remember the details. He talks about it in his many interviews, and they bet, I think, $1,000. Klass lost, and Stan has the check. He still shows he used to show a clip of the check at his various UFO events he used to attend. Bless him. Klass never actually publicly stated that he'd lost this bet. He, like many skeptics, he kept his shop window, as I talked about in my skeptic talk in Newcastle. He kept his shop window really, really clean and bright, and so no one could ever guess anything gone wrong. Some more water here. Oh, sorry. I had a few drinks earlier. I'm still a little bit tipsy. You don't often see me drunk, do you? I'm not drunk, I'm just a bit lightheaded. In 2004, on George Norrie's Coast to Coast radio show, Friedman debated Seth Shostak, the SETI Institute senior astronomer. Now, I saw that, that was good. Now, as you know, I've done an entire presentation on SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. I can't remember to put a link in the description box to that, but you can find it. You know what it's like. I'm doing that presentation again in July at the Swansea UFO Network if you want to come along to it. But anyway, Shostak, along with other ufologists, along with other SETI people, there's this division between them and ufologists. SETI dismisses any evidence of UFOs, just like Carl Sagan did. All these other SETI proponents dismiss it completely. I forgot what he calls it. Stan had a really great way of putting things. He came up with a new words that could fit the SETI acronym. It was a stupid explanation for something. I can't remember what it was, but it was so witty. Stan was very good at that. He was very good at that. Like Friedman, Shostak also believes in the existence of intelligent life other than humans. However, unlike Friedman, he doesn't believe such life is now on Earth or related to UFO sightings. Well, Shostak is completely wrong, as I explained in my talk. Friedman has hypothesized that UFOs may originate from relatively nearby sun-like stars. Well, that's possible because if you look at the universe and how big it is, people say, well, they must be out there somewhere, but they're a long way away. This is what the SETI people say. But really, it's more evidence. More evidence is coming to light. Really, is leaning towards the idea that life as we know it, Jim, emerges very, very easily when the right conditions are there. So basically, if you have an Earth-like star, you have a planet in the Goldilocks zone, life as a type we would recognise as life almost naturally appears there. It doesn't need some kind of cosmic accident or some comet with the right chemicals on. It just seems to emerge. And I can't remember the details of how that came about, but there's definitely distinct evidence that is the case. A piece of evidence that he often cites with respect to this hypothesis is the 1964 star map drawn by alleged alien abductee Betty Hill during a hypnosis session, which he said was shown during her abductions. Right, I've talked about this. Yeah, Stan always very much supported Betty and Barney Hill, and indeed he's written several books actually with Kathleen Marden, who is Betty Hill's niece. It was she actually who first released this information. I mean, I must admit, when I first heard about this from a friend on Facebook. They said, hey, have you heard Stanton Friedman's died? There's this guy saying it here. Is it true? Is it true? And I said, no, it might not be true. Let's wait and see. You know how many people. William Shatner died at some point, and it went all over social media with all the tribute stuff. I think there was a few tribute memes that came out. But someone actually mentioned that it was not fake news. It was not real. It was fake news. So we just, so everyone just sort of embarrassedly deleted everything, and Shatner himself had to come on TV and say, look, come on YouTube and say, look, guys, I'm still alive, you know. Haven't gone to the final frontier just yet. So I withheld judgment. I didn't say anything. I just looked around for information about whether it was true or not. I wanted to see if it was true or not. And then I saw Irina Scott had said something, and Richard Dolan had said something. Oh, it's got to be true now. So I'm afraid there's no more doubt. The late, great Stanton Friedman. Stanton Friedman's no longer with us. Anyway, as I said, check out the books. Abducted by Kathleen Marden and Stan Friedman. Kathleen actually spoke at UFO Truth magazine 2 years ago, and she did a really good talk about herself and Betty and Barney Hill. The Hills died. Barney actually died in 1969, just not long after the abduction, just a few years. Betty actually lived until I think she died in the late 90s as an old lady, and she never changed her story. I've seen an interview with Betty Hill from 1997. It must be just a couple of years before she died. And she tells the same story she told in 1961 in the media with her husband Barney, that they had been taken by aliens. Astronomer Marjorie Fish constructed a three-dimensional map of nearby sun-like stars and claimed a good match from the perspective of Zeta Reticuli, about 39 light years distance. The fit of the Hill Fish star maps was hotly debated in the December 1974 edition of Astronomy magazine, with Friedman and others defending the statistical validity of the match. That's interesting. In Carl Sagan's Cosmos, he has, I mean, I've shown you this if you watch my SETI video, but he shows, he does a big debunking exercise on the Betty Hill star map. And of course, for reasons I explain, I don't consider Carl Sagan's debunking to be valid. Friedman has stated strong views against SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence research. Friedman contests the implicit premise of SETI is that there has been no extraterrestrial visitation of the planet, because it is his claim that SETI is seeking only signals, not extraterrestrial intelligence or beings. He maintains that the prominence of widespread public claims of those involved with SETI have tended to prevent serious research, including research by journalists, of UFOs. Well, that's interesting that SETI is a disinformation campaign. I mean, Steve Bassett said something similar to me privately, actually. It's this weird conundrum that I go into in more detail in my SETI video. But there's, according to Carl Sagan and Seth Shostak and other people, there's aliens out there. They're all over the place. They have technology way in advance as what we have. We're building spaceships that could. We have a design for a spaceship that could reach the nearest star. That came out in 1950, from the Daedalus project. So we have to assume that these more advanced societies on other planets have developed more advanced spacecraft. Yet when any evidence comes to light to the fact that they've actually used that and they've actually got here, we have to deny it. It's insane, and Friedman he was quite right. Friedman has criticised Carl Sagan, a proponent of SETI, good for him, for ignoring empirical evidence such as 600 plus unknowns of the Project Blue Book Special Report 14. I'm doing another video on Project Blue Book shortly because the series has almost come to an end now in Britain, and I'm doing another Project Blue Book video. I'm interviewing Dave Altman, actually, who's involved in the series. He's going to be on Panama Radio, but it is. I mean, it's interesting that. Basically, I'll say more about this when I do the video, but J. Allen Hynek said that it was a cover-up. Anyway, Friedman argued that this empirical data directly contradicts Carl Sagan's claim that in other worlds, that the reliable cases are uninteresting, and the interesting cases are unreliable. You've got to remember, Stanton Friedman was a proper scientist. He always used proper scientific language when he talked about what he meant. He always used the proper scientific terminology and everything. He never backed away from that. He was far more conservative in that way than I am. Specifically, Friedman refers to a table in Project Blue Book Special Report number 14 that he says shows that the better quality of the sighting, the more likely it is to be unknown. That's interesting, isn't it? The better they've witnessed, the more they describe things, the better they sort of like reveal what they're saying, the more likely it is that they will dismiss it as unknown. So it's the poor quality cases that get dismissed as aircraft and weather balloons and kites and swamp gas, etc. Specifically, Friedman refers to a table. The better quality of, this is the quote, the better quality of the sighting, the more likely it was to be an unknown, and the less likely it was to be listed as containing insufficient information. That's interesting, isn't it? That calls into question the whole 98% explained thing that even people like MUFON and Bufora are always going on about. Friedman says of the response to his talks, I know that most people are unfamiliar with the several large-scale scientific studies because I ask, after I show a slide and ask about each one, how many of you read this? Typically it's 1 or 2%. He says that the talk he gave to Canadian journalists in St. John, New Brunswick, caused the attitudes of the journalists to change because the attendees had no idea there was so much solid information as opposed to the tabloid nonsense they thought was the primary source of UFO data. Exactly, the media is covering it up. That's why the mainstream media ridicules and denies it. That's a quote, actually, from a former head of the CIA. Official ridicule and denial. And indeed, we saw this at the citizen hearing, where the former Congress people were like sitting in front of this panel, and their minds were changed. Friedman has argued that the majority of people believe UFOs exist, and at least some groups of scientists do as well. Yeah, but a lot of the scientists won't speak out. They're not willing to commit themselves the way Stan did, for reasons I've explained. It's peer pressure, etc., etc. Milgram, Zimbardo, and things like that. Gallup polls between 1966 and 1987 asked respondents the questions, are UFOs something real or just people's imagination? Of those who took a position one way or the other, 61% to 64%, 68% to 60% took the position that they are real in 66, 1977 and 1978 and 1987 respectively. So that's pretty much in the 60 to 70% range. That's a majority. With respect to scientists, a poll was taken by Industrial Research and Development in 1971 and 1979. Of the respondents who took the positions, 64% and 69% stated they believe UFOs either probably or definitely exist. Of this subgroup, 32% and 44% consider that their origins be outer space in 71 and 79 respectively. So that's a massive leap actually between in those 8 years between that they consider to be extraterrestrial. Approximately half believe them to be natural phenomena and were undecided. Peter Sturrock also polled the membership of the American Astronomical polled the membership of the American Astronomical Society and found that the greater amount of time one spent on reading UFO material, the more likely one is to accept their reality. That's because of evidence, isn't it? Criticism and controversies. There we are. Now, Stan was a major media belligerent. He was a CNN pugilist. His best videos, you go on YouTube, they're all there. This is going to be a wonderful memorial to this man. Go on YouTube, just watch his debates with Philip Klass. Watch his debates with Michael Shermer. He's brilliant. He can eviscerate these people almost effortlessly. Here we go. Friedman is outspoken in his articulation of positions and his criticism of UFO debunkers. He was the UFO debunker's worst nightmare, Stan. Often stating he's not an apologist ufologist. I love his wit. He had that wonderful Jewish way with words. His positions are regarded as controversial in the mainstream science and media. But Friedman claims to have received little opposition at his many lectures, most of which have been colleges and universities, many to engineering societies and other groups of physicists. He has had a number of debates in the mainstream media, including one with the aforementioned Michael Shermer on CNN. Yeah. Now, it's interesting, you see, like, the people who actually engage with the evidence, Friedman comes out on top. The extraterrestrial hypothesis comes out on top. Every time, absolutely overwhelmingly, it comes out on top. This idea that they're not real and it's just, you know, it's, if you look into the various trains of information about them being not real, about being, well, it's just nothing really, it's just, you know, it's mistaken identity, etc., 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 right? Whenever you come across that, almost invariably, the dismissals come from people who've just got their information from the mainstream media. Friedman has been criticised by both skeptics and other Roswell researchers for taking the position that there are no substantive grounds for dismissing the authenticity of some Majestic 12 documents. Friedman himself was the first to provide evidence that some of the documents are clearly hoaxes. For example, he showed the supposed memo from Admiral Roscoe Hillencutter to President Truman, dated February 17, 1948, was actually an emulation of a letter from Marshall to Roosevelt that was featured in the book The American Magic. Friedman has researched the MJ-12 documents since first becoming aware of them from William Moore and Jamie Chandray in 1984. William Moore, unfortunately, there's a big story behind that. He did a deal with the devil, but I'm sure you may be familiar with that already. I've discussed it in one of my Peasmore videos. Anyway, Stanton Friedman addressed criticisms of the original documents in both sources. And as an example, Philip J. Klass claimed lexicographic inconsistencies based on the use of pica typeface in the Cutler-Twining memo, and offered a $1,000 in a challenge to Friedman for each legitimate example of use of the same style and the same pica type as used in the memo. That's the font that the typewriter used. Friedman provided 40 examples and was paid $1,000 by class. He was indeed. And class never said a word about it. Friedman has never let him forget it. Friedman had been married twice. He first married Susie Virginia Porter, and he divorced her in April 1974, and in Los Angeles. He adopted 3 children with his first wife and had 1 daughter with his second wife, Marilyn. Friedman relocated to Marilyn's native New Brunswick in the early 1980s, and I think it was Marilyn, his wife at the moment, who is widow. His widow, who of course has my deepest condolences. And there's a list here of the various books he's written. It's a whole lot. Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, co-authored with Kathleen Marden, which is his most recent book. Flying Saucers and Science, which is in 2008. Top Secret Magic, 2005. Crash at Corona, the definitive story of the Roswell incident, co-authored with Don Berliner, 1997. Science Was Wrong, startling truths about cures, theories and inventions they declared was impossible, co-authored with Kathleen Marden. I think that may go into other subjects apart from UFOs, which indicated in his later years he was moving away from just plain ufology. He was becoming more of a generalist like I am. There's several figures. I mean, there's 2 people have commented so far on this. Richard Dolan, of course, who of course is very, very prominent and well-respected member of our community, has said this. I'm deeply saddened over the passing of Stanton T. Friedman. Stan was someone important in my life. Since I began researching UFOs, sorry. To me, he was someone important in my life since I began researching UFOs. To me personally, he was a trusted colleague and mentor. To our community, he was the standard bearer. He was essential in reopening the Roswell case. He argued for the authenticity of the MJ-12 documents. He spoke tirelessly about UFOs to large and small crowds around the world. He debated with skeptics, schooling them every time. Stan was brave, good, and always an inspiration. In addition to presenting the facts on UFOs, his lectures usually spoke about humanity's need to get its act together and move beyond tribal warfare. He was so right. His books and articles were models of clean writing and argumentation. It's hard to imagine ufology without him, and it bloody well is. Dr. Irena Scott, a good friend of mine. I've interviewed her 3 times or 4 times now. Very sad news about Stanton Friedman. I was lucky enough to meet him several times and served on the MUFON board of directors with him. We'll always remember all his papers with everything covered in black and marker. His voice of science in our field. I mean, the loss of Stanton Friedman has come so soon. It's just like there's this run of deaths. There's Anthony J. Hilder died a couple of weeks ago, I think, and then David Farrant, also of the Highgate Vampire, he died. I've also found out that I don't know. It's the guy. I suppose it's common knowledge now. I was not meant to say anything, but it's common knowledge now. Colin Snuggs, the guy who did the skeptic debates with, he's passed away too, and I was very, very sad about that. I know he's not in our community, he's a skeptic, but he was involved in it, and I was very, very sad. He was very young too, he's only 42. I'm just like, Stanton Friedman, I mean, I'm still at a bit of a loss for words, and you don't often find that with me. I'm still reeling a bit. I mean, I knew he was an old man, 84 years old. He almost died 3 years ago with his heart attack. I knew he wasn't long for this world. He actually retired last year. I remember he said he announced he was retiring, and I thought, I said I wished him a long and happy retirement, and he's had a happy retirement, but not a long one. It's interesting, you know, at the age of 83, he was still going strong in ufology. When people are complaining now because they can't retire at 65, he was still going strong. Oh, he's like, I don't think he never really completely retired even then. But it's true. I mean, I can't. It's hard to imagine what we've been through. The whole time I've been into UFOs, especially the conspiratorial ufology angle, the exopolitics, the idea of Roswell, not just the guys who look for lights in the sky, you know, and say yes, but there's no government cover-up, none at all. You know, not just that. It is specifically the conspiratorial ufology angle. He was a grandfather to us all. He was a mentor. He was our rock. He was our foundation. He was the man everyone turned to for wisdom and advice. He was the man you could always rely on, and he never wavered. The closest he came, I think, to making a mistake was over Bob Lazar, and I've talked about that in my Bob Lazar live stream. That's the one thing I think he really got seriously wrong. And even then, you know, he did it. He was always dignified. It's like he was. I think he was what I wish all of us could be like. I wish, you know, none of this trolling, none of these Facebook like button wars I talked about before. This bitchiness. There was none of that in him. He just wanted to get the job done. He wanted to get it done. He just wanted to get this done, to get disclosure, etc., etc. And it's very sad he never lived to see disclosure. It's very sad indeed. And I just hope that wherever he is now, that he can see into this world and he can see where things are going, and he knows that disclosure is coming soon. And when it does happen, he will be there in spirit with us. That's what I hope. That's what I hope we'll see. That's what I hope he will see. It's hard to describe how significant his loss will be. And from somebody who's that old, and we knew wasn't going to be along, he wasn't going to be around anymore, and we knew there was times going to come when we'd have to say goodbye to him. I knew that, and I knew that time wasn't long. I thought he might have a few more years of retirement left. His wife Marilyn was the one who said, "Oh, she wanted him to retire. She wanted him at home." And well, he did go home and retired with her. But he didn't have very long. This is something that I think is going to have a huge impact over the whole of conspiratorial ufology. This is a situation where we, and essentially, it's going to enter a new era. Whenever the founding father or whatever you might call it within that field dies, often it's the starting gun of a new. It's the starting gun that begins a new era, a new race, a new phase of that particular movement. It doesn't mean it ends, and it's not going to end. Stan wouldn't want it to end, and it ain't going to. But without him, it's going to be different. As Richard Dolan says, I can't imagine ufology without him, and neither can I. But we're going to have to, and we will. We will carry on. This movement is much more than just one person, even a man as great as Stanton Friedman. And with the risk of sounding irreverent here, he was just that. He was a guy. And I mean, I didn't get into Roswell and because of him specifically. I didn't come to this understanding because of him specifically. It was just when I got into it, I discovered him, and he inspired me, and he informed me, and he educated me, as he had many, many people. There are others who will take over that role. Others who will. There are others, I think, who may be able to step into his shoes, but I mean, it won't be the same as him. There are other people, I think, who many of them inspired by him, who can carry on, can pick up the baton and carry on with it in this long, long haul, this long mission of ours for our objectives, that is, full disclosure, etc., etc. There are many other people who can do that, and even when he was alive, there were others who were doing that, and Stan was always modest. He was never one. He was never. He was charismatic. He was eloquent. He was incredibly witty, and he had this real way with words and descriptions. And maybe it was because he was Jewish. I mean, Jews do tend to be like that. But it was also it was his science. It was his knowledge. It was his understanding. It was his perception of the subject. Really, I think it really was that set him apart from everyone else. There's no one else quite like him, and there never will be anyone quite like Stanton T. Friedman ever again. But you know my thoughts and feelings on death. You know how I regard it. And I'm pretty confident he's out there somewhere right now, sailing among the stars. Maybe talking to these aliens that he's always had such an interest in his whole life. Maybe now his curiosity is finally fulfilled. I sincerely hope he's downing a beer somewhere with Robert Anton Wilson and all those other greats who have left us. And it is sad, actually. I mean, when I got into conspiracy theory generally and the paranormal, I met and I encountered many people who were very old and who we lost and will continue to lose. That's life. That's the circle of life, as Disney said. But we're going to carry on. Stan, we're going to do you proud, mate. I promise you. We are going to take your legacy and we're going to run with it. And I'm so sorry you weren't here to see the completion of this mission. But maybe that the mission involves more than one lifetime, and it could be that none of us alive today will ever see the end of our mission. Well, I think we will. We have to, otherwise the Earth's going to be destroyed. So one way or another we have to. But I don't know. Maybe it's a possibility that we don't know how long we're going to live, do we? But it's not about what we experience at the end of it all. It's about what we do to achieve that end. There's that famous saying about, I think it's a Japanese catchphrase or something, about the men who water the seeds of trees that they will never live to sit under and enjoy their shade. But we know that our children and grandchildren will, and that's what we do it for. That's what Stan did it for, and that's what I'm doing it for. Be nice to see it myself, but even if I don't, it won't change a single thing. I think Stanton Friedman was the kind of guy who understood that. I didn't know him well. I only spoke to him a couple of times. I met him once. I interviewed him on my show. I phoned him a couple of times. I exchanged emails with him a few times. So I can't call him a friend as such. Well, certainly I don't think I was a friend to him, but he was a friend to me. He was a man I looked up to enormously, and he inspired me enormously, and I respected him enormously. And I'm extremely sad to hear this news. So rest in peace, Stanton T. Friedman. Gone, but not forgotten, and he will never be forgotten. Thank you for watching. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.